Welcome back to Kings of the North on this Tuesday. Doug Lesmerises will be joined by Dan Wetzel around 12:30 in about half an hour. Dan and I will discuss this meeting that the Big Ten and the SEC bosses are going to have next week in Nashville. The things they seemingly are going to discuss, what it means for college football, what they should decide, what they should or should not do to the rest of the sport. I am conflicted on this Big Ten SEC thing because on one hand, here in the North, we do view the SEC is the enemy. Is the enemy the right word? How we view the SEC? Is the SEC the enemy? Maybe not a direct enemy, but now I feel silly. No, they are our enemy. What am I saying? So the SEC is the enemy. So then the Big Ten, it's like, well, it's the North. But then when the Big Ten is like teaming up with the SEC, potentially at the expense of our northern brethren in the Big 12 and the ACC, then it's like, well, why is the Big Ten talking to the enemy? But you kind of understand why the Big Ten is doing it. So this show splits the college football world north and south. But when the big folks in the North and the big folks in the South are meeting at the expense of everybody else, then I'm conflicted. So we need to talk this out. It is off-field stuff that I think is tangibly important to the football. I just threw my pen. My grip. There is others. Do I have another pen? Hey, can I get a pen? There's nobody here. There's realignment happening and stuff today. Again, there it is. We just aren't going to worry about that. But this is like tangibly important stuff that they're talking about ball. So Wetzel and I will dig into that. But Landis and I did our playoff picks again. So we are not a show that does redone playoff brackets every week. Maybe we should be. If you guys want that from us, I mean, it's a good headline every week. If you want that from us, I guess we could. Well, we certainly could. We can do whatever we want. But this is our first new playoff bracket since the preseason. So how much did we change? Where were we wrong? Oklahoma. I just should have made an all-North playoff bracket. Why do I even try? Why do we even attempt to acknowledge that Oklahoma and Ole Miss and Missouri exist? Because they just are going to let you down. So we have, my wife brought me pens. There is somebody here. She brought 30 pens for me to like lose a grip on and throw across the room. Look at that. I would not refer to her as my assistant. I would refer to her as my life partner and spouse. So thanks, wifey. I missed on a lot of my playoff bracket. So we redid it. It tells you, it tells you like what we think has happened, but also what we think is going to happen. So people always love talking about playoff stuff. So, and I know you guys miss Landis on Tuesday when he's not here. So Bill will have the punt and block of the week later. We will have the overrated Southern team of the week later, but I just want to, I don't know if the battle is over on the 12-team playoff because the people who are anti the 12-team playoff, the main argument is it would devalue the regular season. And I just don't feel that on Saturdays. Do you feel that on Saturdays? Do Saturdays feel devalued to you? Not as exciting? Was Pitt, West Virginia devalued by the 12-team playoff? Was Boise State, Oregon devalued? Was Alabama, Georgia devalued? Caleb says maybe do a bracket like quarterly. I think that's what we're going to do, actually. It's like, this is like the third way, right? It's a 14-week regular season this year because there's 2 buys because of the calendar. So we're 5 weeks in. So we'll do it probably after week 10. And then, we'll do the final one before they actually do the final one. I don't think anybody, I think you would have to talk yourself into the idea that Saturdays are devalued. Are Sundays devalued? Are armchair quarterback after the fact that you would rather have a team season ruined, which is the thing that I've been saying from the beginning. Do you wish that Kansas State was out of the playoff race because they lost to BYU? Like, if that's where you are, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how that adds to enjoyment, because if the idea is you're ruining the best regular season in sport, are you? Did we? Is it bad? I think it's still great. and the opportunity has expanded. I counted up the teams that I think today, and by teams, I mean fan bases, and by fan bases, I mean you. Thanks, everybody who's here. Give us a thumb, subscribe, tell a friend. 134 teams in FBS, 68 power conference teams. I think 46 of 134 fan bases right now, as we start October, can legitimately have a playoff conversation. Not talking themselves into it, looking at what your team has done and could do, and whether that would be good enough potentially to get in the playoff. I think we're 46 of 134. I think we're 38 of 68 among power conference teams. I think the G5 teams, it's one spot, who can talk about it, think about it. It's maybe not the primary thing because you're thinking about rivalries. You're thinking about just, hey, can we get to 8 wins? Can we get to 10, whatever? But it's at least in the back of your mind. And for some programs at the front of mind, Army and Navy, Liberty, UNLV, Boise, James Madison, Washington State, and Oregon State. So that's 8. In the Big Ten, I think there are 10 teams that can be thinking about it. Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, obviously. Iowa, USC, Michigan, and kind of that middle tier of accomplished teams that were thinking about it before the season and still are, even though USC has a loss, even though Michigan has a loss, right? You don't have to be perfect. And then 4 surprise teams that, if they run the table or close to it, will be in the mix: Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois, and Nebraska. Now, are Rutgers fans and Indiana fans, is that front of mind? Maybe not. But you can have a conversation. If an Indiana fan walked up to me and said, hey, I think we have a shot to make the playoff, like, nobody's laughing at that. Nobody is laughing at that. Maybe what's the word? Somebody in the South who doesn't know what they're talking about would laugh at that. But that's the expansion, because is Indiana going to win the Big Ten? I mean, I don't think so. But that's not the discussion point. It's, could they be the 3rd or 4th best playoff contender from the Big Ten? Yes. If they have 10 or 11 wins, they're that. And that could happen, and that this world creates that. 10 from the Big Ten. From the Big 12, I think there are 11 teams, because that is wide open. BYU, Kansas State, Utah, Colorado, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Arizona, West Virginia, UCF, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati. Two conference losses, you're not out of it. So I'm including some teams that do have 2 conference losses. Oklahoma State has 2 conference losses. Oklahoma State's terrible. But if they want to talk themselves into being in the playoff race until at least the middle of October, I'm not going to take that away from them. Not for a team who in their heart beats the heart of a mediocre SEC program. 11 teams in the Big 12. In the ACC, I think there's 8. Miami, Clemson, Boston College, SMU, Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, and Cal. All would say, hey, if we get our stuff together and we have the potential to do that, we're right there. And then in the SEC, there's 4. Alabama, Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. And then everybody else is fooling themselves. That's what I wanted to say. I will say that LSU, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Mizzou, and Texas A&M can also think about it if they want to. So actually 9 from the SEC. 11 Big 12, 10 Big 10, 9 SEC, 8 SEC, 8 Group of 5, 38 of 68 can be thinking about it now. That is wonderful. And the Saturdays are still great. Okay. Time for renewed playoff predictions. Will we be any closer this time around than we were in the preseason? Let's see what Landis and I had to say about that. Time to talk about our playoff brackets, Landis. And my preseason playoff bracket was a turd. Was yours a turd?
It was okay. There's some stinky stuff in there, but it was by and large, I think, okay.
Yours is, I thought, was significantly okayer than mine.
Yeah.
So we want to reference our preseason playoff bracket here. Some shows do a playoff bracket every week. We usually do our rankings. We didn't do our rankings on Monday. We ran through every team instead. But this is like a reset, right? We're a third of the way into the regular season. Or It's a 14-week regular season this year. We're 5 weeks in. I think it's a good time for a reset, but we want to acknowledge where we were wrong as we try to figure out where we think we are now. And this is predictive. To me, this is not, if the playoffs started tomorrow, this would be my bracket. This is based on what has happened so far and what I think is going to happen the rest of the year, what I think the playoff bracket will be. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes, this is. I did it how I think the season will end based off what's happened so far. Yeah.
Okay, so I will say I have 6 teams the same from my preseason bracket and 6 teams different. So let's run through, and we are not predicting who's going to win quarterfinals and who's going to win the national championship. We're just saying now where we are right now, who we think the 12 teams are that are going to be in. All right, here's my 12 of who I think is now in. My 1 seed is Ohio State as the Big Ten champ. I, in the preseason, thought Ohio State would lose 1 regular season game. I'm less convinced about that now. I think it's still possible. I don't know what my official prediction is on that, but I have them as the 1 seed. Texas as the 2 seed, the SEC champ. Kansas State as the Big 12 champ as the 3 seed. And I will defend this. I will defend it for like 15 minutes. I don't know what to do with the ACC, Landis. And I had NC State in the preseason. So whatever my ACC champ pick is now, it can't be worse than that. So I'm going with Pitt.
I like it.
I don't want to pick Miami. I have Tennessee as the 5 seed, Penn State as the 6, Alabama as the 7, Oregon as the 8, Georgia as the 9, Iowa State as the 10. That's a second Big 12 team. And Indiana as the 11. I'm of the North, Landis, and I will not apologize for it. So I understand that I might be the only person in the country that has Pitt, Iowa State, and Indiana in the playoff right now, but I am who I am. This is not a bit right now. We were talking about on Monday is what I am doing here a bit. It's not a bit. Would I bet my house on this stuff? No, but it is a reflection of the idea that I think there is a lot of stuff that is up in the air. And if I'm going to search for, I feel like I definitely legitimately was searching for the 11 seed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just where I am. If I'm searching for the 11 seed, I'm not grabbing an SEC team. If an SEC team slaps me across the face and says, I'm a playoff team, I'm not going to ignore that. But I already have 4 SEC teams in, so I'm not going to search and be like, I guess it's Ole Miss. So I'll take the Hoosiers. So that's 6 different teams for me. I traded Utah for Iowa State. I traded Notre Dame for Indiana. I traded Oklahoma for Tennessee. I traded Missouri for Alabama. And with the 12th spot, I traded Fresno State for Boise State. And I also traded NC State for Pitt. So one of the things there is I liked Oklahoma and Tennessee in the preseason, starting second-year quarterbacks, and I picked the wrong team. I picked Oklahoma and left Tennessee out of my bracket. I should have picked Tennessee. So 6 the same, 6 different. Do you hate my bracket?
I don't hate your bracket. Because the ACC does feel very much up in the air to me. I want to you. It's not you might be the only person. You are the only person who has Pitt and Iowa State and Indiana in his playoff bracket. I would bet a tidy sum of money on that. But it's also like it's not like Pitt's 4-0. Pitt has not started ACC play yet, right? It'll start ACC play this week against UNC. So we'll start to get some better feedback there on what exactly Pitt is in that conference. But that conference is not like overwhelmingly impressive, right? Like people thought Louisville might be the best team in that conference, and then Louisville just went and lost to Notre Dame. Miami looked vulnerable against Virginia Tech on Friday night. Clemson maybe has turned itself around, and I think is interesting. But to say definitively like this team's the best team in the ACC, I don't know how you would do that. So if you want to throw a wild card in there with Nard Dog and the Pitt Panthers, I won't fight you on that. And then I like the Iowa State pick and the Indiana pick. Like the schedule's there, the opportunity is there, because we talked about Iowa in very similar terms coming into this season. So why would we not talk the same way about Indiana, provided what Indiana has done thus far and what lies ahead?
How wide open do you think the race is for like the 9, 10, 11 spots in the playoff right now? I mean, and it's one of those things. It's like, how wide open do you think it is in October? It's October. But I mean, I just, because it's one of those things. A lot of people had Ole Miss in the playoff. Like Ole Miss, what are we talking about? A lot of people have Missouri in the playoff. I thought they have looked very vulnerable. I had Missouri in the playoff. You know, like I didn't know where to turn. Did you feel that, or did you feel pretty confident with yours? No,
I felt the same way. I think the pool for those spots is actually pretty large, right? I think it's like you invite the idea of a second Big 12 team. I still think if you don't like Ole Miss or Missouri, like they're in that conversation, I think they will be. Like the 10-2 SEC team pool, the second Big 12 team pool, Notre Dame, and then the Big 10 team that maybe you don't think is a playoff team, but has a favorable schedule to get them to perhaps 10-2, I think is in that category too. So you're talking like anywhere between like 6 to 8 teams, I think, for those, 3 spots at the bottom of the bracket.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And again, I only had 3 Big 10 teams in the playoff in my preseason bracket. But I had Notre Dame in there, and we talked about the idea that Notre Dame, I think, just can feel like a Big 10 team when we get to have a conversation like this. So I slid in Indiana for Notre Dame, either because I think maybe Notre Dame is vulnerable enough that they're going to pick up a second loss somewhere, or because when you line it up, I just think Indiana might have more meaningful wins than Notre Dame does. So that it was really maybe a Notre Dame, and I'm going to continue to push back against like 5 SEC teams in the playoff. If the reality is the reality, but while we're talking about fake early October rankings, I don't want to live in a 5-team SEC in the playoff world. I don't want to live there. So I'm not going to create that world for myself.
Yeah. I didn't create that world either. I don't have 5 SEC teams. So
good. That's why I love you. I love you, brother. All right. They can cram it. What's your bracket?
So my 12 are Texas as the 1 seed. That is consistent with my last pick. I like you came around on the idea of no undefeated teams in the regular season, and now I kind of think Texas and Ohio State both might go undefeated. So I have Texas and Ohio State as my top 2 seeds. That's not a change for me. I have Kansas State as the 3rd seed, winning the Big 12. That was also a carryover for my first bracket. My first kind of change is I actually have Clemson winning the ACC. I had Miami previously. I like Clemson now. Like Clemson has turned itself around. Granted, it was against App State, NC State, and Stanford, but it has won those games rather handily. So I think Clemson might be back on track. And also I don't think that conference is very good, and I don't think Clemson's schedule is particularly tough from here on out. Clemson doesn't play Miami. They might play each other in the ACC championship. They don't play in the regular season. So I have Clemson as the 4. I have Alabama as the 5. That is like my SEC runner up. I feel pretty strongly about that. Penn State is the 6th. So I moved Penn State ahead of Oregon from my last time. I have Oregon at 7. I have Tennessee at 8. I did not have Tennessee in my original projections. I have Georgia down at 9. I had Georgia 7, I think, last time. So Georgia has fallen a little bit for me. I have Notre Dame in because I kind of just think Notre Dame is going to run the table, and at 11-1, even with that loss to Northern Illinois, I think we'll probably get in over most of the 2 lost teams that it is compared to. I have Iowa State at 11. I had 2 Big 12 teams in my first projection, Kansas State and Utah. I still have 2 here. I just have Kansas State, and now I have Iowa State. And then I made a change in the G5 spot. I had Boise coming into the year, and now I have UNLV. Those 2 teams, by the way, play G5 game of games, I think, in 3 or 4 weeks, which is going to be pretty awesome to watch. But I think UNLV is a good team that already has a win over a Power 5 program in Kansas, and I think could potentially get another one this week against Syracuse.
I'm surprised you moved off Boise. Why'd you move off Boise?
Boise's defense scares me.
Okay.
Boise's defense is a little open for business, I think, in a way that maybe UNLV's is not. And I actually think UNLV, with all the quarterback drama it had last week, probably ended up in a better spot with Hodge Malik Williams now playing there, who can actually throw the ball. He had 3 passing touchdowns in their win against Fresno last week. So that's a pretty complete G5 team, I think. It's not like I'm banging a table for UNLV. I think it will be either of those 2 teams. I just sincerely hope it's not Liberty, and I thankfully don't see a lot of people projecting Liberty, which makes me feel good.
Yeah. I've seen JMU.
JMU's playing really well, and JMU just hammered who they play, Ball State.
Oh, they hammered.
They beat UNC, and then they just hammered. Yeah, then they just hammered Ball State. Yeah, JMU's good. Okay. Yeah, it could be JMU.
So I noted that you had 6 Northern teams in your 12-team bracket. UNLV, not a Northern team. I have 8.
Yeah.
Boise's definitely of the North. And then I have Ohio State, Kansas State, Pitt, Penn State, Oregon, Iowa State, Indiana. Man, I love myself. Okay. I feel much better. My preseason thing of I think Bama's going to beat Georgia and not make the playoff. I very much think that has a chance to be true. I think a real Bama regression, as we talked about on Saturday night, road games in the SEC, Kalen DeBoer realizing what this is, not like catching up to Bama, but I do think Bama is not perfect. And some teams, I think that's very possible. I really do. And then somebody else from the Big 12, from the SEC slides in there, right? Georgia, as much as I am sure that Georgia will lose at least one more game, like I'm not going to leave them out of the playoff the way things are evolving at the moment. When it feels like you're not exactly sure, because if those are the four SEC, the strongest four, like that's four strong playoff candidates right now, right? Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, very strong right now. I don't know who the next SEC team is. So that, I think, in a world where Ole Miss has lost, Oklahoma has fallen apart, and Missouri has looked vulnerable, and LSU lost to USC, like where are we turning for that? So when people want to have a 5-team or, God forbid, a 6-team SEC playoff bracket, I don't know what you're looking at right now. So
are people still doing that after the Ole Miss loss? I haven't poked around enough.
I hope not. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. But if I still, to me, and again, we don't want to be ridiculous about Bama, Georgia, but I thought there were some things that as you noted, both teams had flaws, but now I don't know who keeps them out. So I think there are games to be lost there for Bama and Georgia still going forward. But I think that top 4 in the SEC is pretty set, because the next tier, I think, has fallen away.
I think so too. I just I'm not like overly impressed really at all with Missouri, which I know hasn't lost yet. But I just tried to. I do think both of those teams still, though, have schedules that are kind of going to prop them up right at the end of the year. So if that's what people are relying on when they're still projecting 5 or, God forbid, 6 teams from the SEC in the playoff, I don't agree with it. I understand it, because it's not that large of a leap in logic to say, like, I still think they're going to be 11-1 or 10-2, but I don't find either of those teams particularly impressive. So I didn't put either of them in because of that. But maybe I should have paid more attention or given more deference to those schedules. But I just don't think either one of them was all that good, so I didn't want to put them in.
So then the other question is, and I find it to be very interesting right now, which is why I wound up at Coach Sig's, is who is the 4th best team in the Big Ten? Who is the number 4 on the list of likely Big Ten playoff teams behind Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State? And I feel like that is fairly wide open right now. And it is some version of like the preseason. Well, I think Michigan and or Iowa have a chance to be pretty good, versus the, oh my God, could Indiana or Rutgers actually make the playoff? Right? Yeah.
I think USC is probably still part of that conversation.
And
too,
USC. Right? I forget that USC is in the Big Ten because they're not in my Big Ten.
Right.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. And like USC has a chance to play, like, host Penn State. So like, I think we've talked more about USC as a team that can like upset the Big Ten title race, and maybe less of a team that can actually be a Big Ten playoff participant. But I think it's still out there, especially with like the Notre Dame game still looming for USC too. There are opportunities there to put together a pretty impressive resume for that team. If you just take all the competitors for that 4th spot, like I think you feel, I guess you feel best about Indiana, right? Like Indiana has to play Michigan and Ohio State, but Indiana, Michigan, like on a neutral field right now. Who are you taking? Like, are you definitely taking Michigan? Because I don't think that's a definite, right? Maybe you still land on Michigan, but I don't think it's like, of course you're taking Michigan. Iowa has already lost to Iowa State. It will probably lose to Ohio State. So like, I don't know what else it'd be using to prop itself up in this conversation. So,
and Nebraska is on the edge of that conversation. Yeah.
I guess like if you want to like really extrapolate it out, and like at the end of the year, Iowa is 10-2 and Indiana is 10-2. What's the more impressive 10-2?
I do think, for instance, that Michigan game in Bloomington could be the exact perfect game for Indiana, where it is winnable, but also would help them, that it will look better than it might actually be.
Yes. Yeah.
And that could be tremendous. Looking at the odds to make the playoff right now among Big Ten teams on DraftKings, Ohio State is minus 1,200, which is like, put them in the playoff right now. Oregon is minus 400. Penn State is minus 200. So there are 8 teams that have minus odds to make the playoffs right now in the country, and 3 of them are in the Big Ten. The next Big Ten team is USC at plus 180. Then we kind of fall back quite a bit to Indiana at plus 700, Michigan at plus 800, Iowa at plus 1,000, Rutgers at plus 1,500, and Nebraska is like way down there. Illinois is down there. Nebraska's down there. So like that world, I do think in a world, this is one of the things that people say, I say all the time, in a world, and I do say it a lot. The fact that we are searching for a 4th Big Ten team right now, and we are searching for a 5th SEC team is very good for the Big 12.
Yes, I think that's right. Because I thought coming into the year, there was just a lot of like cut and dry ACC, Big 12 or one bid leagues. And now I from what I have been able to look at, I see a decent amount of 2 fields that include 2 Big 12 teams.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great spot for the Big 12. It's interesting to me that if there is some vulnerability there that would allow a position for a second team from either the ACC or the Big 12, it feels like people are more pivoting toward the Big 12, or maybe they're giving each conference a separate team, but a second team, because Notre Dame kind of screwed the pooch a little bit too. So I guess both could get second teams, but I think if you polled people and said like, which of these 2 conferences do you think will get a second team, you're going to get more Big 12 than I would have assumed coming into the year.
I think the worst case scenario for the Big 12 is Clemson and Miami looking really good and rolling toward a ACC title game. I think we started to see, and I'm certainly not the only person that has brought this up, but Cam Ward at Washington State had a history of looking awesome early in the year and then regressing as the competition increased and making mistakes and not being the same guy in November that he was in September. And I thought we started to see that against Virginia Tech. Now, he made some amazing plays, but also Virginia Tech probably should have won that game. So like, I think I'm expecting that at this point. So when I think about the ACC, I did think about Clemson. Like I think maybe Clemson's got it together and they just lost to Georgia early. And they actually, as much as for everything they're still probably the most talented team in the ACC. But I also think Clemson's going to go lose to Florida State this week because that just feels like a thing that could happen. I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Yeah. But I just think the ACC is going to be chaotic, and that includes, though, like a bunch of teams like that losing stupid games. The South can lose stupid games too, and so I think we are on track for that with Miami and Clemson. And then again, like you start diving into Pitt's schedule, there's some real possibility with the Pitt schedule in there, right? Just like Eli Holstein, the defense getting better, Des Reed's going to get back healthy. They do have a lot of pieces, and they've been here before. Pat Narduzzi has been here before, as he brought up on our show. It's like there's not a lot of teams that have been to the ACC title game, and Pitt's one of them. So this is not. I was like, oh, Pitt, what are they? It's like, I don't know. A program with tremendous football history who's had some real success recently in the ACC. Yeah,
it's not. That's why it's not great. Like I don't trust Pitt's defense to get it there. But it's not bad to have an offense that can win games in the fourth quarter the way this offense has either. So I think Pitt could get there. Like Pitt does play Clemson, right? Pitt plays Clemson.
Yes, Pitt hosts Clemson. Yep.
Yeah. So that'll be a potential pivot game, I think. I just think I think it's very possible that Clemson is the most talented team in the ACC, and I don't trust Cam Ward either. To like win the games that Miami has to win to win that conference. I am upset. Like you mentioned that Clemson is playing Florida State this week. I don't think we're going to get DJ against Clemson because there's an or now between DJ and Brock Glenn at quarterback for Florida State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How about that? What a mess. What a mess that league is. Holy moly. So it's definitely there for the taking. And what do you feel? I think we'll definitely do. Well, maybe we should save it. I would like us to do I want us to be held accountable for the things that we say on this show. So Maybe we should save it for a separate segment. I've been thinking about it. Maybe we could do it as a segment next week of like dumbest and smartest, like where we were the most right in the preseason and where we were the most wrong. But I don't know. How many teams did you swap out? I swapped out 6 from my preseason. How many did you swap out?
I swapped out Miami, Michigan, Oklahoma, Utah, and Boise State. So 5.
Okay. And I was surprised because I thought you like Miami was a much better pick than NC State. I thought maybe you'd keep Miami. And I feel like I finally caught up to you on Boise. I was trying to be like different in the preseason because there was a lot of Boise. And it's like, I realized like, what am I doing? It's Boise State. And then you got off of Boise. So it's like, that really happened with football. It's like, I finally agree with Landis's football takes. And he's like, yeah, I changed it. So
one of the teams I swapped out to was Oklahoma, which I only put in there because you convinced me to.
I know. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But it's interesting. You had moved off of Notre Dame in the preseason, which turns out. But
they put them back after they
put them back in after they lost to Northern Illinois. You just really wanted a gut check. I just want to see how they respond to a MAC loss, and that really showed you something.
Yeah.
So you were off Notre Dame and you're back on. You were on Michigan in the preseason and you're off. By the end of the preseason, was off of Michigan. And so I have stayed off of Michigan. But I was then on Notre Dame, and now I'm off Notre Dame. We are. Why would anyone listen to anything we say?
I'm not so much like super in on the idea of Notre Dame as I am like anti-putting Ole Miss or Missouri in my playoff bracket. So it's like someone had to go in there if I wasn't going to put those 2 teams. And I do think Notre Dame will finish 11-1, even if it might look a little ugly as it doesn't.
Coach Siggs is here. He would welcome you to the Indiana playoff island. That is true.
Yeah.
It's the same state. It's close. You could walk. You could walk from South Bend to Bloomington, can't you? Maybe take like 6 hours. So like
I also think like you could I think now like raise an army of people on your behalf in Bloomington by declaring Indiana the best football team in the state of Indiana.
Oh, but we don't want to. Do we want to do that in the North? We want everyone to like everybody in the North. We want the state of Indiana to celebrate together. Is there anybody out there who's like, I love the Fighting Irish and the Hoosiers?
No, but as we discussed previously with Connor O'Gara, there is a sentiment at Notre Dame that it is not of the North because it is not of anywhere. It is on Earth. So, we can send an army of Hoosiers to South Bend.
That was when Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South was trying to claim Notre Dame for the South, which I don't think he's trying to do anymore after they lost to Northern Illinois.
Probably not.
Geographically, they're in the North, but in their heart and soul, they're in Mississippi. It's like, what are we talking about? Go away. It's good. Like I think we could have like a conversation about 18 different teams for spots 10 and 11 in the playoff, which is kind of the whole point. All right, so we needed to check in with those. We won't do it every week. We'll probably maybe do it a little more often as we get through stuff. But those officially are the Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis updated college football playoff bracket predictions on Kings of the North. Definitely gonna be right. Now we got it right. Okay. Thanks for hanging in for that. Dan Wetzel, right around the corner, doing it next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises, Dan Wetzel here for his regular Tuesday appearance. Dan, you enjoying your Tuesdays?
Always enjoy it. Either at noon or 12:30, best part of the day.
We love having you, brother.
Yeah.
All right, so the SEC and the Big Ten are having a meeting in Nashville next week. Should we go? Are you going? Do you want to go? Do you want to go to Nashville? Hang out?
I am not going to go, but what is Kings of the North going to do if there's an alliance? And I know it's a dirty word, not for the Big Ten, but if they're going to alliance with the Kings of the South?
I don't know. I'm very conflicted. I have 6 topics for us to discuss about this, Dan, and this is the first one off the top. Because as I was discussing at the top of the show, it's the idea that like we like to think that the North is regal and loyal and doing right by everybody, and the South is the enemy. And then it's like, oh, but wait, the Big Ten and the SEC are talking about destroying everybody else. So you referenced the alliance. The previous, and actually it was the alliance actually, between the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big Ten. And almost everybody made fun of the alliance from the jump, and especially after it immediately crumbled. I actually liked the alliance in theory and partially in practicality, because I understood the idea of somebody trying to team up to stop the SEC and ESPN from taking over college football, or maybe at least slowing it down. And I wish that we would have been in a situation where the playoff was on multiple networks, right? And ESPN didn't entirely control that. And I was hopeful that maybe you could form like, okay, the SEC is the king, but we're going to get everybody else together to fight them, because that's how you fight a power. You get everybody else to fight them. And then the Big Ten just decided, you know what? Let's just stab the Pac-12 in the back, take their conferences, and now we'll work with the SEC on our own. So my first question is, should the Big Ten be working with the SEC like this? I kind of liked it better when the SEC was isolated and it was everybody else against them. Maybe it just made me feel better in my heart. But the Big Ten just like sort of threw everybody else over and said, we'll go with the big guys. Does this make sense for the Big Ten?
I think it makes sense for the Big Ten for the most part.
Okay.
For college football, no. It's not good for college football.
No.
It's not good for a lot of the other schools in the North. For parts of the Big Ten, yes. I mean, look, these are the 2 dominant forces, and so they're going to write the rules. And they're going to set up the playoff how they want it. And they're going to get as much money as they possibly can. And they're going to set up a scheduling agreement, perhaps, that'll help the playoff bit and all of that. So in some regards, it's good for the Big Ten. But I would put it this way. Was it good for the Big Ten to decimate the Pac-12 the way it did? Maybe. I mean, in terms of revenue and power and all that, but is it really good for like Minnesota or Michigan State or Iowa or Indiana or Purdue or any of these schools to add more teams that have better resourced and probably more of a easier path to great success and get knocked down the pecking order? No, I don't think it is. I think the old Big Ten was better for those leagues where you could, for those types of schools where you could say, look, man, we get a Mark D'Antonio, we can build up our program and we can win this league. When you're staring at 18 schools, you're like, gosh, there's only 16 in the AFC and the NFC.
Yeah.
You got 18. Yeah. Man, how the heck do we get above not just Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, but USC and Oregon and so there's a lot of the best thing that these administrators have done. The craftiest move they have done is they got fans to root for revenue, which didn't make any sense to me. When you cheer on your NFL team, are you excited that boy, the Cleveland Browns are making a lot of money now? The Detroit Lions are popular now. I'm really happy for the Ford family. They finally are making some money.
We rightly hate NFL owners, right? That is the way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
But in college sports, we go, I'm Purdue. I'm making $58 million in TV revenue. It's incredible. And you're like, great. You have more administrators making more money, more golf. You can fire your offensive coordinator and pay him out. What are your chances of winning?
But then I don't want to put too fine a point on this, Dan, but I blame you because did you not? I'm just imagining you do. You're a very humorous, sarcastic, cynical at times, but joyful. Would you say that you are joyfully cynical?
I'll take it.
Yeah,
Definitely cynical. Definitely cynical.
I like it. Yeah, but you love college football. You love what it is. You laugh at the absurdity, but you embrace it.
I embrace it, all of it.
I understood the idea of trying to rally the troops to build a firewall against the SEC's dominance, but everybody made fun of it. And if we were still in a world for the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were always like-minded. When the COVID stuff was happening, they tried to be like-minded and tried to say, hey, maybe we should do this and be a little more cautious. And the SEC said, we're playing through it. And then eventually the Big Ten said, okay, I guess we're playing through it too. And the Pac-12 kind of didn't. And then you pull in the ACC that has a lot of private institutions. I thought an amalgamation of not the SEC made sense. And hey, we have a lot of Fox stuff going on over here, and we want Fox involved with the playoff. Just like in the NFL, it's not one network that does all of this. But people didn't like that idea. I think if that's where we were, where the Pac-12 had survived, and those other conferences, almost everybody but the SEC, kind of thought alike, worked together, worked with their networks, and there was a balance of power, I think that would have been better. But instead, the alliance immediately crumbled and got mocked.
Well, what got mocked wasn't that there was an alliance. There was two things about it. One,
the name.
The alliance was funny, okay, because it sounded like Star Wars or something. Like, what are we doing? Two, it was done because they were mad that Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC. Like any of these other conferences wouldn't have also accepted Texas and Oklahoma. So there was a bit of just like, get over yourself. Like that was the reaction. But the main part was they didn't have a signed agreement. It's like this kid out in Vegas going, somebody in Vegas promised me $100,000. I don't know. Where's my money? Okay, dude, good luck. A lot of people have had that story. I think it was Hangover 2. Can't believe it. I didn't get it in writing. We said, what is this alliance? And they said, well, we're all going to agree. And they said, did you have an agree? Oh, we looked in each other's eyes and no one's going to betray us. Like, have you been paying attention to college sports for the last, 125 years?
I know.
They're going to betray you. And sure enough, it was like,
I'm naive.
The Big Ten was like, come here. I'm the grizzly bear. Come here, little salmon. Don't worry. You swim over by me. You're gone. Pac-12 got decimated. And I agree. The best thing for college football as a whole, and I believe for the Big Ten and all these leagues as a whole, is 5, 6, like 10 good leagues.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're not going to be equal. No, the Mountain West isn't going to be as good as the SEC, but you want healthy leagues. Let's take the old Big East. All right. Bunch of northern schools in the Big East. Every school that used to be in the Big East, pretty much every school, BC, Syracuse, Rutgers, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Miami, Florida. I don't know. There's more. Syracuse. All of them, if you say, what are you trying to do? We want to get back to our glory days. Your glory days were the West Virginia, were the Big East.
Yeah.
They're all trying to get back to something they once had. And they all broke up and chased money, and none of them have been as good as again. But
so in the end, I do think that would have been a better plan. Everybody against the SEC and ESPN if they would have done it right. You agree with that idea?
Yes,
but instead,
mainly against television executives. But instead,
but once ESPN jumped to the SEC, because the ESPN used to be with the Big Ten and then you have the TV network that controls the playoff now with the biggest conference. Those are the two single biggest forces. They united. So then it's everybody else led by the Big Ten. I would have liked it. It didn't work. The Big Ten is now thrown in with the SEC. Okay. So we admit that it happened. Yes. They should have made an agreement. It could have worked. Question number 2. Now that the Big Ten and the SEC are meeting in Nashville next week, how should they view other conferences? Do they want to consume them? Do they want to ignore them? Do they find them to be nuisances? Or should they, and is this just naive again, embrace what the ACC and the Big 12 are right now? You want it to be a national sport with regional interests. You don't want to exclude them. It does make the playoff and then the entire sport stronger if those conferences still have some real substance to them. I really have liked the evolution of the Big 12 as what I call kind of like an outlaw conference that has Nelly as the halftime show and doesn't have a superpower, but embraces what they are, markets what they are. I don't think they're trying to be the Big 10 and the SEC, but I think they're an awesome alternative. So, but when the Big Ten and the SEC get together, is the first discussion point, how do we kill everybody else? Or should they find a way to be like, hey, we can be strong and get what we want, but still have other conferences that exist and also can thrive in their own way?
They should embrace your plan, but they will not. They'll see them not as we're going to crush them, but more as nuisances.
Okay.
We can't crush them because that might cause lawsuits and Congress. Like I find the whole congressional stuff funny. Like they have, say, like West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin works on this bill because we're like, well, players are getting money. We need to work on transfer rules and all this stuff. Like this meeting is much more problematic for the schools in your state than any transfer portal.
Yes.
Like West Virginia, let alone Marshall, can get pretty much wiped out as non-entities. If this meeting, this is what, if you're I don't believe the politician should be involved at all. Let me just say that. But if you're going to be involved, it's a lot more important to say, wait a minute, what's going to happen to all these schools where all these economies impact, these teams impact the local economies and all the different stuff. It's a lot more important than some guy at UNLV quit the football team.
Right.
Because he may or may not have been promised some money that he didn't get. But they're missing, again, everyone focuses on the wrong thing here. So they should sit there and say, hey, look, we're going to be better off if the ACC, Big 12, like we don't care. We're fine. But that's not what they're going to try to do. They're going to sit there and say, we need 4 automatic bids each. Why don't you just compete for the 4 bids? You're going to get them.
So that's the next topic, though. Because
okay,
I actually. So here's the thing. So that's the next thing is, should they each get 4 bids, right? And that's the reporting that they want this, but it's in a 14-team playoff because it's not a 12-team playoff. It's in the expansion to 14. I just think they should take the guaranteed 4 and people should give them the guaranteed 4 because they're probably going to get them anyway. And I don't think this is a point. This is not the hill to die on because the SEC and the Big Ten taking 8 guaranteed spots out of 14, you still give 1 to the G5 and then you have 5 other spots for the Big 12, the ACC and Notre Dame. 93% of the time, that's how it's going to work out anyway.
Right.
And so if the Big Ten and the SEC want to guarantee something that is very, very, very likely anyway, just give it to them. And the real question, like the SEC is always going to get 4 and a 14, and the Big Ten almost always will. I actually don't have a problem with this. And if I was the Big 12, and especially in any world, if guaranteeing the SEC and the Big 10 4 somehow would guarantee the Big 12 and the ACC 2, take it.
If they get
if
2,
you can get guaranteed 2, take it.
Absolutely.
So I just don't think this is that big of a deal.
The extra automatic bids is weird to me. But it's the mentality of I must codify my advantage, right? And it's more the mentality, because I agree. Of course, you're going to get even in the 12-team playoff, you're probably going to get 7 of the bids every single year.
You're going to get 7 or 8. Yeah, for sure.
You absolutely could get 8 this year. I mean, It's very easy to see 1 Big 12, 1 ACC, and 1 group of 5, and then it's Notre Dame maybe gets the other, and the other everything else is SEC Big.
That could be 9. I mean, like that could be 9 at times. So like to guarantee 8, I don't.
What are we doing? It's all about the control, and that's the part that I think is more like, man, I don't like the mentality of what they're going in for. I don't really know what the point, but I agree. Is this the hill to die on? No. You want to have 4 automatic bids, have 4 automatic bids. So, go right ahead. You don't have to, you figure out how to sort those out. And especially on a 14, I wish we just stayed at 12. Wish we just had a 12-team playoff, because I think
that's fine. I agree.
Creates people talk like, hey, Georgia and Alabama, it doesn't matter. Georgia's in anyway. You sure about that? They still got to play Tennessee. They got to play Texas. They got to play at Ole Miss. Like they could end up 8-4.
This is not the show that is guaranteeing Georgia playoff spot.
But
we will tell you that.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. The regular. Yeah. They're automatically.
People are idiots. No, they're not. People are idiots.
Yeah, look
people
at
are
the
idiots.
Schedules. So
they're idiots.
That's fine. Whatever. Yeah, I agree. This is what you're going to do, and I think I talked to a lot of people, and including in the Big Ten, and like the thing that I've it's kind of what I said earlier. It's like, why did the bottom in the middle of the Big Ten want Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA? Why did you want that? It made it, you're less likely to succeed. Like, what is your goal here? Because to me, when college football, the goal is the overarching goal is to have fun, win some games, fill up your stadium, get your alums back on campus, create an exciting thing that draws students and all that.
Yeah.
When you're now more likely to lose more games, how is that helping you? And they go, well, we get this guaranteed TV money. Like, that's the athletic department thinking, I'm going to make more money, but it may not be good for my overall experience, and it's really not better for my athletes or anything like that. They just went along with it. So, and you go, how the hell are you ever getting in this playoff? How the hell are you ever having a winning season? And I don't know.
And that's the thing of, like, by guaranteeing 4, like, okay, well then you like
just finish top 4. Right.
If the Big Ten had a guaranteed 4 this year, because on our playoff conversation, we just talked about that's like, who's the 4th Big Ten team right now? If you think Ohio State, Oregon State, and Penn State are well positioned, the 4th spot is wide open with USC, Iowa, Michigan, but also with Rutgers, Indiana, Nebraska, Illinois, who really emerges from there. But then part of the issue is, well, if that 4th team is 10-2 Indiana, are they going to get in? Or are they going to be knocked out by some other SEC team? Like, you are, if you guarantee 4 from the Big Ten's perspective, you're creating that opportunity. Well, we're at least going to be,
that's what we're
going to have 4. And I think that's fine. And I just don't know. Like, I'm not sure who's offended. And again, it's not 4 out of 12, it's 4 out of 14. And the whole reason they want 14 is because if they're going to guarantee that the 4 conference champs are the top 4 seeds, they want the opportunity for the 3rd and 4th seeds, who are the Big 12 and the ACC champs, to lose in the first round to at-large teams from the Big 10 of the SEC. So by the time you get to 8, it might be 4 Big 10 and 4 SEC. That's what they want. Because, if it's only 2 buys instead of 4, the 2 buys are going to be the SEC and the Big 10. They just want those other conference champs who are getting guaranteed spots, which is good. If you win your conference, you should get in for sure. They just want to knock them out sooner.
That's why, I mean, they're a nuisance. They're not trying to crush them. They're a nuisance.
Yeah.
And 2 things. One, absolutely, you got to have that automatic, because, like, if you look at the Big 12, it's a lot of fun this year. Like,
totally.
The 2 undefeated teams in the Big 12 right now are BYU and Iowa State, not the ones we thought. Right. Anything can happen in this. And I'm glad that anything can happen, and they don't have to sit there and say, boy, if Iowa State needs to run the table to get in this playoff. Right? It's like, okay, let's just have a fun season in the Big 12 and someone will emerge and get in the playoff. Great. Maybe it's Kansas State. Maybe it is BYU coming out of nowhere. But you're not sitting there going, well, you started the season out of the top 25. You couldn't climb high enough, or one non-conference game didn't pan out the way you wanted.
Yep.
So you didn't get the strength of schedule. So that here's the only thing with this 14 that I wish they would do, and they won't, but I wish they would. At some point, they're going to. Home playoff games all the way to the title game, at least the semis. Because if you want to incentivize the regular season, you do it with buys and with home field. And then when Georgia loses and they come in, let's say they get in as the 4th team, but they're the 12 seed, they're playing, well, our first game's going to be at Penn State. If we win that, we got to go play at Tennessee. If we win that, we got to play at Alabama. Like, now you got a hard road. When you do these neutral sites, you eliminate the advantage of the team that's had a great season. So you got to get more home field in. I think they will do that, because I think this is going to be so exciting when they have home playoff games, that the bowl industry's last grip on this thing, which makes 0 sense, is going to slip out of their hands.
What was the name of the book you wrote a long time ago?
Death to the BCS.
What's the B stand for in that title?
Bowl. Bowl industry, incredible. They outsource. College football outsources its most profitable product. They let someone else run you cannot get Roger Goodell to hand over the AFC Championship game to some guys who say, hey, let's play this in the Alamo Dome, not Kansas City.
But they're wearing orange sports coats.
Yeah, but they took me on a golf outing, right? Like, what are we doing? No. And these guys will chase every last dime, right? These people are obsessed with every last dime, and then they go, well, the first responder bowl, I mean, we can't be given. That's because the ADs get bowl bonuses.
Do you think, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, You wrote a book called Death to the BCS, and then it died. Do you think you killed it?
I don't think it hurt because we were able to lay it out there. But no, what killed it was there was more money in a playoff. But we pointed out there was more money. But
yeah, a lot
of the talking points of bowls that they would use. And I will say this is a total aside, but when we were writing it and we researched, I had every bowl contract, every expenditure. Like I had boxes and boxes of documents. And I remember sitting down with ADs and even commissioners and saying, well, do you know you're doing this? And they're like, wait, how's this work? Wait, what happened?
Oh,
and
wow.
like, well, your band had to stay 3 nights at $375 a night hotel, even though the market rate in the city at that point was $180. And they're like, wait, what? Like if the block was more expensive? Yeah. Oh, and then the bowl director's kid her daughter had their wedding there at that hotel. It's kind of interesting. Maybe just coincidence. Yeah, you go through all the stuff, and then there was a lot of skepticism. It used to be like, oh, the bowls give so much to charity, and it's such a great experience. Like you're paying for all of that experience. I think one year they charged Florida. The University of Florida got charged $75,000 for like a conference room once.
Yeah.
Like,
and didn't even know it.
Didn't even know. No one knows. No one's looking at the contract they're signing. And it's like, yeah, you guys are getting crushed here. So I don't think it, but did it fully do it? No. Money did it.
I'm not trying to arrest you for it. I'm trying to credit you for it. So
I'm happy. It's better that this is better than the BCS.
Dan Wetzel, bowl murderer. All right. This is the other thing
they might want to do. Hate me. They hate me.
Oh, good. No, I'm glad. Enforcing their own rules. This is another discussion point for the Big Ten and the SEC. And like, what does this mean? Like, what rules? Is this like how many coaches you can have, roster size, those kind of things where if, now you want 160 guys on your roster because you're willing to do that with a scholarship and NIL, that's fine. If you want to have 17 full-time assistants, that's fine. Is that what they're talking about? And if so, and if the SEC and the Big Ten say, we're making our own rules, everybody else, like you do what you want to do, but we're going to allow ourselves to have 20 assistants. Should anybody fight against that? Or is that another thing to say, okay, fine. They want to control that. Let them control it as long as we're still in the playoff with them.
The playoff component is the number one thing. Like they have to maintain access to this playoff. It's the only thing that keeps you alive.
So, which I agree with. To me, just give in. I think just give in.
I don't know what this is, but it isn't about enforcing their own rules. It's probably about writing their own rules. I don't know what this is about. Here's the thing about competitive balance that
which does matter. Which does matter.
And we have and so. A lot of what people are going to say every time there's a rule change has always been wrong. College sports loves crying. The sky is falling, right? What did we hear about NIL? Alabama will get all the players, right? Only a couple schools will get all the players. I don't know anyone that would argue there isn't more competitive balance now than there was 5 years ago. There are more teams that can win the national championship now than there were in the past. You take a Missouri, a Tennessee, Michigan. Michigan really was never a national contender until 20 years ago, whatever. But now they go 15-0 because they were able to keep all these kids. From going pro, and they were able to fill in some gaps. Like all the stuff they usually say is completely wrong. They have the wrong idea, and so if you say, well, we're gonna have more, coaches will complain, and coaches get a lot of the media reacts to the noise of the coaches, and the biggest advocates on TV are former coaches or media that's talking. So they will tell you it's a disaster, everything's horrible, we got to do something. There will be competitive balance. You can still have good teams outside of outside of the Big Ten and SEC because there are too many good players.
Yeah.
It's too much talent to just sit there and say, oh, we'll only have these two leagues. It's not like the NFL where you define the players. There's still going to be a really good quarterback. You could, the Gentry kid up at Boise State, he's the best running back in the country. It just is, right? I mean, he's unbelievable. And that's just going to happen because you got too many guys, and Boise State says, hey, we'll pay you to stay here. So you can't, I don't worry too much about these resource things.
Okay.
Coaches will complain, but I don't think that's a big deal. Nor do I think it'll be that big of an advantage for the Big Ten and the SEC to have whatever rule they're coming up with that'll give them more opportunity.
let them write their own rules, and then the ACC and the Big 12 and everybody else can decide, like, well, do you want to follow that or not? Okay, right. Well, they're going to have 20 assistant coaches. Okay, well, we'll have 14 or whatever. I would not die on that hill. A big part of this you mentioned earlier is that they're talking about like a scheduling agreement. So part of it is maybe in the postseason, in the non-playoff bowls, do the SEC and the Big Ten play each other more? But it might have been on an Atari 2600. I did this like in 2007, Dan, where I created a Big Ten SEC challenge on my video game system. Mm-hmm. I emailed the Big Ten and the SEC about it. I tried to get them to talk to me about it. They wouldn't. I played it out every week, this matchup, whatever. If they want to have a scheduling agreement, if the Big Ten and the SEC said we are going to have a non-conference Big Ten SEC challenge every year, and we are going to tell teams this year you have a home game, next year you have an away game. You know that ahead of time. And then we will plug in what the matchups are at the end of the previous season. And we're going to do it. Half the games are going to be week 2 and half the games are going to be week 3. Are you kidding me? How good that would be for those two conferences, the money they would make. You keep track of who has the most wins, and it would dominate college football. And if that means the Big 12 and the ACC have a harder time scheduling Big 10 and SEC teams in the non-conference, that wouldn't be great. Then just have a Big 12 ACC challenge and do the same thing. Let's go on this yesterday. If they want to schedule each other more to make more TV money, yes, please.
More great games, undoubtedly, as a fan, more great games. This is what a long time ago, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten were going to do this.
Yes.
And if they had just done this, we would still have the Pac-12.
Yep.
Well, there is a Pac-12.
And we'd have Michigan playing USC in the Big Ten Pac-12 challenge, right. And it would be fine.
Or Ohio State visits Oregon. It would have been fine. It would have been better for overall college football. So this is better. This is two things. One, we're going to consolidate the money between the two of us, and we're going to freeze out these other schools because it will limit the number of ACC Big 12 teams that get a shot at the SEC and the Big Ten. This also will help in the playoff when we try to redefine how teams are selected, and strength of schedule is more important. So it's got multiple benefits for the Big Ten and the SEC at the detriment of everybody else.
So then find a solution though. So find a solution and make Clemson play Utah, and have Florida State play Kansas State, and Pitt played West Virginia and Cincinnati this year. And I wouldn't love it that we would never see the SEC. We wouldn't see Clemson, Georgia anymore because Georgia's too busy playing Michigan or whatever. But find a solution. And for the average fan, I do care about Pitt and Boston College and Utah and Iowa State and teams like that. Cy-Hawk they'd find a way to keep Iowa State going, even if Iowa's playing an SEC team. They would. You would find the things that really matter. You'd find a way. You'd find a way. So I do care about those schools, but I care the most about college football fans, and it would be awesome.
More big time games. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Great. This is the last one, Dan. Like, should they just give up and take over and break away? And that this is it. And that maybe there's a couple more Big 12 or ACC that come in the back door to the SEC and the Big 10. But that's it. We're not joking around anymore. It is an ACC Big 10 playoff. And then everybody else, maybe go do your own playoff. And so it's not a group of 5 playoff. It's everybody who's not the Big 10 and SEC playoff. And that's what the Big 10 and the SEC would decide. As you said, playoff access is the number one thing. So nobody else would want this. But if the Big 10 and the SEC do want it, I'm not sure there's anything anybody else can do about it. Should they just drop the facade and go do their own thing?
That one would get Congress involved.
Okay.
I mean, if you're the senator,
so let's say you're Congress.
No, I don't
want Congress.
I don't. I'm just saying it would. I mean, if you're the senator in, I don't care, any state, even Ohio.
Yeah.
There's, what are there, 10 Division I teams or whatever? FCS?
That's a lot. Yep.
Well, you represent all of them.
Yep.
And if you're the rep that handles bowling, but let's say you're in Iowa. Well, you're not letting Iowa State just get crushed. Like, hold on. That is their risk. I wouldn't do it. And here's why. You try to make a mini NFL. The problem with the NFL, or the problem with that is in the NFL, someone's going 1-15.
Right.
Or 1-16 now. Or 3-14. and attendance drops and fans stop watching and there's all this tumult. But you can sell your fans on the excitement of the next year. You're getting the number 1 pick. You're going to get your savior, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're the Houston Texans, and now you got CJ Stroud. You're the Washington Commanders, and now you got Daniels coming in. So you prepare for the draft. You're going to rebuild. You're the Lions, right? They rebuilt their whole team. Now they're good. And it's cyclical because the worst teams get the best players and they get the easiest schedule.
Yep.
In college football, the best teams get the best players.
Yes.
They don't just get 1 draft pick. They can get 5 of the top 10. Right?
Right.
And so how in the world, if you're coming in last, who's going to come in last in the Big Ten this year? Purdue, maybe?
Purdue.
Purdue.
They already fired a coach. It's Purdue.
Well, every year you win it, you're going 2-10.
Yeah.
No one wants to play for you. You have to get to 5-6 wins. You still have to play these other teams. You have to find a way to have all of college. I mean, if you just sit there and say, we're just playing each other, no more MAC games, no more FBS games or FCS. Yeah. I'm sorry. I always get it messed up. No more, we're never winning. You're never going to win. And so that would be a disaster if ever, year after year after year, you're going to, and there's no hope because you don't have the resources of the upper half of this league. And so they have to have all these teams because you got to get to 3, 4, 5, 6 wins. You got to have at least some hope. You just want to have a nice, pleasant, it's parents' weekend, right? Bring in a team we can beat. It's homecoming. Yeah. Everybody's happy. We win a game. The sun fall. The leaves are falling. Good stuff. We're not good enough to. There's realism. I don't think people are Purdue football fans are sitting around thinking we're going to win the national championship. They never thought that. Not since Bob Greasy was there or something.
Yeah.
But we can have fun. We can be pretty good. Maybe we beat Ohio State every decade. Maybe we, oh man, we almost, maybe we can be pretty good. We get to 7, 8, maybe not, whatever you can do. If not, you're never getting the players. You never have hope. So they can't go that route to me without if I'm the bottom half of the Big Ten and the SEC, I'm going, great. I got a lot of money, but we're horrible. We're trapped and never getting good.
It is one of the great, I don't know if it was always the plan or it just happened, but the idea in major professional sports in America that losing has a benefit. There is hope in losing to the extent that in the modern era, teams have been trying to lose to gain that hope. I love tanking. So that idea, as we evolve with college football, it is the one place where it is not true and will never be true. So you make a great point here. And all that means is that the sport must think harder and be more proactive in the search for competitive balance because it will never happen naturally. And I think underlying a lot of stuff, and this is where, I think you're right about this, competitive balance and a version of hope for even the most downtrodden teams, I think is like the most important part of sports. And college football has to fight for that in a way that it just happens in the professional sports. And so you're never going to change player acquisition. So you have to fight in other ways. And if they're not careful, they're going to get that out of balance in a way that we have never seen in a sport of this size. Because we agree, everybody agrees, college football is the number 2 sport in America. But if they aren't careful, if they pursue money and power at all costs, and competitive balance is completely out of whack, man, like we've never seen that before, and I don't want to see the effects.
No, they can ruin it without question. And there's nobody in charge, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody sitting there saying, wait, the NFC East does not get to try to get the Pittsburgh Steelers to join them.
Right.
That's not how it's working. There's no commissioner. And many of these decisions are made in very short-sighted ideas. I'm an athletic director. I finally got to be the AD here. I'm going to do it for like 8 years. I need to make $2 million a year. I'm going to make money off of this. And so I don't really care about the full bit of college athletics. Some of them do. I'm not saying they all act this way, but I'm looking at how I can improve my budget for my athletic department I'm not really concerned about the overall benefit, the good or bad for my university, for my community, for my thing. I'm sitting there saying, I'm going to get a bonus. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to be able to hire more people. And that's what they've done by getting people to cheer for revenue and say, hey, man, look at Purdue football may have one of its worst seasons ever. And could be very hopeless. I don't know. I don't mean to pick on Purdue. Well, you got more money. Who cares? It's not your money. They're not going to lower the ticket prices, not lowering tuition. They're not. It's like, great, we got more money and more teams are beating us and we're in a more hopeless spot, let alone just if you love college football like I do. And I think people listening to a show like this, I love that there's all these different chaotic games, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was 2 weeks ago, Colorado Baylor, right?
Yeah.
Unbelievable game. There's basically a Hail Mary. It's this wild thing. They rush the field. They rush it again. Like, it's fun. It's just fun. This is what makes the sport so exciting. If you want to watch great football, don't watch college football. Most of it's not very good. You watch the pros. But if you want this chaos, do you really want to sit there and go, Baylor, Colorado, you don't count. Doesn't matter. You don't make enough money. Oh, I love like Wyoming football. I like the concept that the state that has 500,000 people has a program that's trying. And sometimes they're pretty good and they have some good games. And when they get 40,000 people in their stadium, like 8% of the whole state's there. It's amazing. And you sit there and go, well, you know what? Cheyenne isn't a big enough media market. You don't count. It's like, really? Is this what we want to be? Just a spreadsheet off a TV exec? Like, if you care about it all, and I know this is romanticism in a face, those guys in that meeting in Nashville, how many of them are going to care about anything else other than, boy, I'm going to get 4% more revenue, and I can give everybody on my staff, including me, more bonuses. My comp car gets better. I get a second golf club membership.
Yeah.
Good. Congrats.
It is the only sport where money is the primary pursuit as opposed to winning. In every other sport, when First Take talks about the Dallas Cowboys every day, they don't put up a graphic of jersey sales and how much money the Cowboys are making this year, even though they're losing games.
Right.
Pro teams want to win or acquire money so they can win, so they can get more money. And meanwhile, the value of the franchise skyrockets. And I guess there are owners who are cheap and just want to watch the value of the franchise go up.
Sacramento Kings and that type of stuff. Yeah.
Cleveland Guardians. Yeah.
That's
but there are other
Pistons.
But in college football, it really has become the thing where you've made such great points about this, that the pursuit of money is the number one thing and the winning is secondary.
It's the pursuit of guaranteed money too.
And that is
guaranteed money, because they want that guaranteed TV, 4 bids. This is what I know my budget will be. If you want to make money, you can also make it by winning.
Yes. So pursue winning to make money. Don't pursue money and hope that means you win. And they do have to be careful. I think it's going to be fine, but that's the number one way they can kill this sport.
Yes, and I agree. I think it's going to be fine. It's very hard to kill football. I mean, buy stock in football in America. It's not really.
Yes.
I'm not, but I'm saying that the mentality and the push along these things are really not healthy. And there's a lot of people in these two leagues that sit there and there's fans in those two leagues going, "This is great. This is great. We're making more money." You're losing. Like, if you're a fan and you really care about the revenue of your athletic department, fine. But would you rather be, because they'll sit there and say, well, Clemson football, they don't make as much money as Purdue football. Okay, they don't. So what? Wouldn't you rather be Clemson?
Yeah.
Would you rather be a Clemson fan?
Like, who cares?
You know what?
Right. Yeah.
Who cares? You know what? They make tons of money because they win. They fill their stadium. People buy T-shirts. Kids apply to the school. Also, they're close to Atlanta, and Purdue isn't. You have all the money you want at Purdue. Kids want to play near home, and Trevor Lawrence grows up an hour away and says, I'm going here. Right. So what do you want to be? It's just the only sport where they get so excited about revenue. And it's an odd thing, but they've done a tremendous job selling that concept to fans.
Yeah.
I'd be careful. And here's the thing. Eventually, if they're cutting other people out, they're going to cut you out.
Right. No,
you're good.
Say it again.
You're good.
I mean, you've only made Purdue fans super nervous.
Purdue fans going to hate me. I'm sorry. You're having a tough season. Some years it's not you, but
but you got to have your eyes open about this.
Yes.
So in the end, and here's the thing, Dan, you talked about a world where you were providing information to the people who were running college football, and they were saying, what? I feel like if you went and gave a 5-minute speech about this before the SEC and Big Ten had their meeting in Nashville, you might have people in that room turning to each other and saying, he's right. Why are we pursuing money first, winning second? And is that the best way to have long-term health in this sport? Sometimes I can't see the forest through the trees, man. All right. Write a book. Can you write a book? What would be the name of this?
I'm Dan Wetzel. I approve this message. It's right. It's stump speech season. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what. It's going to be fine. It's going to be football, but
I think it is going to be fine. But
I just find it hard to be. I'm not a fan of any of the teams, right? I don't have it. I went to UMass, where like literally the worst team.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not a fan. I'm a hockey fan, an NHL fan. But so I don't quite get it. But I look at some of the schools and go, I don't know why why you think this is working for you. I want to win.
Yeah.
I'm a Boston Bruins fan. I want to win. I don't care about the damn owner. I'm not sitting there saying like, boy, this is great. We're going to screw over the Vancouver Canucks. Okay, great. Am I going to win? Are we winning? Because that's all. When I watch the game, I want to win. Other than that, don't care. Don't care how much money the guys make. Don't care about any of it. Just how's the game going to go?
We kept you long, Dan, but we got fired up. Is that okay?
Let's do it. That's what it's about.
Fired up.
We talk things through like gentlemen.
Because in the end, it's such a good sport. It's going to be fine unless they work really hard to kill it. And I hope I hope the meeting next week in Nashville is not the first chapter of your book of how they ruin college football, because they got in a room and said, here's a chart. This is why we can make this much more money if we cut everybody else out. So be careful. That's all. To the people going to that meeting in Nashville, we understand you're going to get a lot of what you want, but please be careful.
Think of it.
He's Dan Wetzel.
Think of the children.
Think of the children. Think of the podcasts.
No one's going to.
It's like, hey, college football's dead. Our shows are over. You can find Dan on the College Football Inquirer. You can read him at Yahoo Sports. You can catch him here every Tuesday on KOTN. Dan, thanks as always.
Always fun. Thanks.
We'll be right back on Kings of the North.
Bill Landis back here with your block and punt of the week on Kings of the North. Let's dive right into it. We're starting with an absolute nuke from Wisconsin punter Atticus Bertrams. This is Atticus Bertrams from Wisconsin. Backed up against USC, lets one loose here. Gets a nice roll on that California grass. 74 yards down to the USC 1-yard line in the first quarter of their game last week. This was the longest punt of the week, 74 yards. The fourth longest punt of the season in FBS. Nice job here by Atticus to flip the field for his team, and he knows he did it too. He's pretty happy. Watch this celebration. Get a little point here out of Atticus. He goes, yeah, I know I did that. Check that out. Moving on now to the block of the week is a guy that people thought maybe I snubbed a little bit in week one, and I think there was some truth to that, so we're going to highlight him this week. It's Ohio State running back Travion Henderson. Sneaky part of Ohio State's success so far this year is how good its skill players have been without the ball in their hands, and here's Travion Henderson in the backfield, picking up a nickel blitz to allow a touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith. Watch it again, top of the screen. There's the pressure. There's Travion. Bang. Devin Brown can complete it to Jeremiah Smith. Crazy catch, but really good block from Travion. Later in the game, fourth down again. Another touchdown pass. Travion is picking up a blitz up the middle this time to help set up a touchdown pass to Emeka Ibuka. Watch the pressure in the middle. There it is. Travion sticks him in the hole, moves him a little bit. Will Howard has time to connect on the touchdown pass. Just really good stuff out of Trey, who's been excellent in pass protection this season for Ohio State. That will wrap up this week's edition of Punt and Block of the Week here on Kings of the North. Again, shout out to Atticus Bertrams of Wisconsin and Travion Henderson of Ohio State for some good work this past week. We'll catch you next week with more blocks and more punts here on KOTN.
Landis, can't you just envision Landis going through longest punt of the week and finding a guy named Atticus with a 74-yarder and just giving himself a little fist pump? This is I like these two segments back to back. We don't always do them back to back, but to have Bill do punt and block of the week, and then to have me do overrated Southern team of the week is a pretty good encapsulation of what we're doing here. So that was actual football discussion and acknowledging the underserved, the guys who are getting it done and maybe don't get all the attention. And then I come on and scream about the South. Okay, this is the overrated. Did I say underrated? There's no underrated Southern team, by the way. Can you imagine? It's like, oh man, here's the SEC team that nobody is talking about. When will that day ever happen? Overrated Southern team of the week for week number 5. It's Ole Miss. I can't tell when people are trolling and when they are serious. And there was just another national college show where they were having a discussion, and they asked one of the guys, so you're saying, would you put a 9-3 Ole Miss team in the playoff over 11-1 Indiana? And he said, yeah, I think I would. And the other people on the show were like, what? Like, you're crazy. But like, that is the kind of thing that, again, are we doing a bit? No, we're trying to stand up for what I think is a real problem in the sport, and you can't just let the discussion get away from you. So one of the things that was said on that show is that Kentucky is probably the third best team on Indiana's schedule. First of all, that's wrong. And the other thing is Kentucky is practically the third best team on Ole Miss's schedule, which is the entire point. It is not that people are only overrating Southern teams. They are simultaneously underrating Northern teams. So they think everything. They think that people in the North play nobody. They think Indiana plays nobody. And they think Ole Miss is going through a meat grinder. And they're disparaging Indiana by saying, Kentucky's probably the third best team they play. Who does Ole Miss play this year? So I did it. So I did an Ole Miss-Indiana comparison. And again, just to emphasize the fact that if you, and maybe this person said it off the cuff, but if you legitimately think that a 9-3 Ole Miss team would be a better playoff candidate than an 11-1 Indiana team, you are so desperately wrong if you actually look at it and you actually think about it and you are unbiased. And I'm biased towards the North, but if you're unbiased, you are so desperately wrong in a way that is harmful to the sport that I don't even know where to begin with you. So Ole Miss, they're going to wind up playing probably two teams that actually matter this year. They play Georgia and they play LSU. I use the Sporting News 1 through 134 rankings, their weekly ones, just as a guide. Nobody has it perfectly, but just as a guide. By that ranking right now, the third best team they're going to play is Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a mess. The idea that, so Oklahoma's in the top 25, they're 18th on the Sporting News list, is just because there's nobody else to rank. There is nothing about Oklahoma that would say Oklahoma's a good team. There is literally zero. They only beat Houston 16-12, and they benched their quarterback. There is literally nothing. They had to come back and beat Auburn last week. Like there's nothing. They got destroyed by Tennessee. There's nothing. There is zero evidence that Oklahoma is good. They might be the third best team on Ole Miss's schedule. Ole Miss also plays South Carolina. There is no evidence that South Carolina is good. The only evidence that South Carolina is good is that South Carolina beat Kentucky and then Kentucky beat Ole Miss. So this is the circular. It is cancerous to the sport. This is the cancerous circular thinking that props up the SEC. That the Ole Miss loss is good because Kentucky is good, because South Carolina is good, and it's incestuous. They're all beating each other, and the assumption is that it's good beating each other, and it's actually bad beating each other. Why is South Carolina good? Because South Carolina beat Kentucky 31-6, and because Kentucky beat Ole Miss. Well, why is Ole Miss good? There's no reason Ole Miss is good. Also, South Carolina almost beat LSU, but why is LSU good? Because LSU lost to USC, who lost to Michigan, and LSU was tied at halftime with UCLA, a team that Indiana took apart. So South Carolina is good because they almost beat LSU, who lost to USC, who lost to Michigan. But Kentucky is good because they beat Ole Miss, and South Carolina is good because they beat Kentucky. It's incestuous garbage that people eat up. So it's not a bit. It's pushing back with facts. So the fourth best team on Ole Miss's schedule right now is probably South Carolina and then Kentucky. Like they're right there. Oklahoma, Kentucky, South Carolina. That's like going to be the third, fourth, fifth best teams on Ole Miss's schedule. This is Indiana's schedule. Their two best teams at the moment are going to be Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State and Michigan versus Georgia and then LSU. What's tougher? What's tougher? Everything you think that Michigan isn't, Michigan beat USC and LSU lost to USC. What's tougher? Who's better, Georgia or Ohio State? It's at the worst equal. But I think Ohio State, Michigan is tougher than Georgia, LSU. And those are the two best teams on the schedules for Indiana and Ole Miss. Then you have Nebraska. Who's better, Nebraska or Oklahoma? You have Maryland. You have Washington. Who's better, South Carolina and Kentucky or Maryland and Washington? Washington's 3-2 and probably should be 5-0. I'll show you Will Rogers. I'll show you Denzel Boston. I'll show you Jonah Coleman. I'll show you a rebuilt offensive line. I'll show you Jed Fish. And you tell me why you're sure Kentucky is better than Washington. I'll also show you a team that made the national championship game last year and got destroyed. There's at least some fumes of that at Washington. What are there fumes of at Kentucky other than horse manure? Kentucky's lovely, by the way. If you've ever been there and you've driven through and they have all the white fences and you can see the little thoroughbreds coming over the hill. There was a time when I covered a little bit of horse racing at my previous stop. When I worked in Wilmington, Delaware, I've covered the Kentucky Derby multiple times. I've covered the Preakness Stakes. I've covered the Belmont. I was at the Belmont when Smarty Jones was going for the Triple Crown, and I was stationed maybe like 100 yards short of the finish line. And when Smarty Jones passed me, he was ahead. And by the time I got to the finish line, he was behind and they didn't win the Triple Crown. And it was very sad. I really like covering horse racing. I've gone and done stories where you go to a thoroughbred farm and talk about breeding and like the horses they buy. It's super interesting. I really enjoy the sport of horse racing. I understand that it's difficult and you have to treat the horses humanely. And I hope people do that. And if they don't, they should be punished. It's the best thing about the state of Kentucky. Kentucky football is not the best thing about the state of Kentucky. So anyway, if we're going to live in a world where we're going to offhandedly say, oh, Kentucky's probably the third best team on Indiana's schedule, you're so wrong. And to simultaneously use Kentucky to prop up Ole Miss and disparage Indiana is disingenuous. So in the end, their schedules are very similar. And at the worst, Indiana's schedule is equal to Ole Miss's. And I could make an argument, and if we get to the end of the season and it needs to be made, I will be making it. I could make an argument that Indiana's schedule is better. But the point is this. I am reacting to a comment that says 9-3 Ole Miss, I would put them in the playoff ahead of 11-1 Indiana. It's bad for the sport. It's bad for the sport. So I'm glad to do it here. And if at times I push back so hard that I'm being unfair to the South, they'll live. They'll live. Because it happens every day on major national platforms where people say things when comparing North and South football that is a lie. And it's either ignorance or it's a lie. And they're doing it for some reason because they are only looking, and you'll find it more. And I'm not going to live in a world and where I pretend that recruiting rankings and talent doesn't matter. Of course it does. But the sport's evolving. It's evolving with the transfer portal. So high school recruiting rankings aren't everything. I think you could make a strong case that when it comes to development and coaching of mid-tier prospects, that the North is better at that than the South, and possibly significantly better than that. And so I think often you will find the greatest Southern bias among the people who lean on recruiting rankings and nothing else. And so, of course. But you have to be able to look at how teams play and what they've done and who they've played and the great plays they make, the mistakes they make. You have to be able to analyze that and not just refer back to your recruiting rankings as the end all be all. And so we'll keep fighting that fight, and we will mean it. We will mean it. We'll have some fun with it, but we'll mean it because we know it's out there. All right. I like that show. I like talking with Dan about those kind of discussions. I was glad that Landis and I got to check back in on playoff predictions. I would love to have more interviews on this Tuesday show. It is harder as I'm learning all this. It's usually easier to get players and coaches on Wednesday and Thursday shows than it is to get them for Monday and Tuesday shows. So at the moment, we have a plan to have 2 Northern players on our Wednesday show. We might have a player on our Thursday show. We might have another player or a coach on our Wednesday or Thursday show. And they are super important Northern college football players. I don't want to put the names out there because then if it doesn't happen, I don't want anyone to be mad. It's like we appreciate all these sports information departments and players and coaches who are working with us. But we do want to talk to the best people playing the best ball in the North. And we promise to bring you that as often as we can here on Kings of the North. As always, thanks to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. By the way, I would refer back to our Monday show if you did not watch it, where we did happiness fan base ratings. I try to have a reason with the banners that I have up, and I pulled the camera back a little wider so we get more banners in this week. These are the teams that had the worst fan ratings, and so we're trying to lift those fan bases up. So as Dan Wetzel was disparaging Purdue 17 times today, at least you had a Purdue banner to look at, Purdue fans. In West Virginia, it's been tough. Kansas, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Washington, Maryland, Notre Dame, Utah, right? We get it. We're here for you. So lots of Indiana talk coming on Wednesday because we want to look at what the Hoosiers have done and what can be replicated, what can be learned from it, and what can be celebrated about it. So a lot of Indiana talk, but not only Indiana. And then we'll do our picks on Thursday. Thanks to Dan Wetzel for joining us. Thanks to you guys for being here. Thumb, subscribe, tell a friend. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.